leadership. The statue of Lincoln in Parliament Square, a copy of Augustus St. Gaudens's original in Chicago, was a gift of the American people, unveiled in July of 1920 when the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, accepted it on behalf of the British people. At the same time, a replica of George Barnard's Cincinnati statue, a rugged, angular, rough-hewn Lincoln, was placed in Manchester. This was known as the stomachache statue, since Lincoln's hands unintentionally suggest a man troubled with colic. And it commemorates the President's tribute to suffering Lancashire mill operatives during the wartime cotton famine. Meanwhile, John Drinkwater's celebratory play, Abraham Lincoln, opened in Birmingham in 1918 and transferred with spectacular success to London, to the Lyric Hammersmith. Now, as history, the play is decidedly shaky, and much of the characterization is stereotypical. It is ludicrously so in the case of Frederick Douglass, the preeminent black abolitionist who speaks in a kind of pidgin English. But complete with a verse-speaking chorus, the play provides a stirring portrayal of a president weighed down but not defeated by the pressures of war. The part of Lincoln was incongruously played by an actor with an Irish brogue, and indeed Frederick Douglass's lines were spoken by a black, dark, young Alistair Sim. The play ran for hundreds of performances. It drew all social classes, including the King and the Queen, across the Atlantic, and was several times revived in London over the next decade. And well before Lincoln became a cult figure in England, he had become one in Wales. Kenneth Morgan, Baron Morgan of Aberdyfi, I understand, was speaking here very early, just early this afternoon, explains that by the 1870s, Lincoln's portrait was hanging in many of the humbler Welsh homes, often situated next to that of William Ewart Gladstone. There were plays about Lincoln, and Eisteddfodic prizes awarded for compositions about him. And Lincoln became a recognised Welsh Christian name. One huge enthusiast was William Williams, Carew Coch, an Aberdare Unitarian who owned the Stag Hotel and hosted Eisteddfodau there. His hotel had a map of the USA on his wall where supporters of Lincoln would meet to discuss the latest developments in the Civil War. A large portrait of Lincoln was hung in the most honourable place of the house. Of all the devotees of the Lincoln cult, Ken Morgan notes, Carew Coch was the most fanatical. Well, the story of Lincoln, the British story of Lincoln, is just one of many foreign appropriations. For the global story of Lincoln's influence and legacy, the subject of a collaborative work to appear as a book next year and going out of the conference that we held in Oxford last year, this reveals Lincoln as a remarkably versatile model and inspiration, a figure whose ambiguities provided opportunities for multiple appropriations in many different places. By 1900, Lincoln's life had been published in, sequentially, German, French, Dutch, Italian, Portuguese, Greek, Spanish, Danish, Welsh, Latin, Hawaiian, Hebrew, Russian, Norwegian, Finnish, Turkish, Swedish, and Japanese. And over the next 30 years or so, the list had extended to include Ukrainian, Yiddish, Polish, Chinese, Tamil, Czech, Icelandic, Arabic, Hungarian, Persian, Slovak, Armenian, Scottish Gaelic, Korean, Kannada, Burmese, and Vietnamese. Lincoln's Protean polity licensed a range of heroic readings: Democrat, liberal, emancipator, nationalist, citizen commander, frontiersman, orator, self-made man, total abstainer, philosopher, martyr, and many more. Now, here was a celebrity that Lincoln had yearned for. It isn't a pleasant thing to think that when we die, that is the last of us, he told a neighbour in New Salem. And there's little evidence to suggest that his views changed later in life. The individual's best hope of immortality lay in achievements that lasted in public memory. And during his presidency, he felt acutely the historical moment. The international significance of the American Union would give the Civil War's contending parties a permanent place in public memory, home and abroad. Fellow citizens, he declared, 20 months after the war broke out, we cannot escape history. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honour or dishonour to the latest generation. A little later, he issued his Emancipation Proclamation, declaring free the slaves in areas still under Confederate control, and could reflect upon the edict's far-flung impact and the foreign eulogies it elicited, even if their grandiloquence was not to his personal taste. Heir of the thought of Christ and of John Brown, wrote Giuseppe Garibaldi from Italy, you will pass down to posterity under the name of the Emancipator, more enviable than any crown and any human treasure. From Urmia, Persia, Lincoln learned that hundreds and perhaps thousands are learning to reverence your name among the oppressed Nestorians of Persia and of Kurdistan. But it's doubtful that Lincoln, even when the Confederates surrendered, appreciated just how far he had stirred hearts and minds at home and abroad. Yet his death, just days after Lee laid down his arms at Appomattox, prompted a quite extraordinary explosion of mourning around the world. Lincoln had often joked about a vain politician who would have chosen to die years earlier had he known how big his funeral was going to be. The joke now took on a mournful irony. What a consternation, what a general consternation, what an immense grief all over Europe. Lincoln dead, Lincoln assassinated. That is the universal cry, the all-excluding topic in court palaces and in the cabins of the poor. So wrote the distraught United States consul in Bremen. I have witnessed in Europe the memorable epochs of 1830 and 1848, but never have I seen such a general commotion, such a deep consternation. This was no sorrow-induced overstatement. In many different parts of the world, John Wilkes Booth's crime occasioned widespread public grief at huge gatherings. A blizzard of tributes engulfed American consulates, the messages of ordinary men and women, and the voluntary civic groups that they represented, churches, secular societies, working men's, improvement and mutual aid associations, democratic circles, ragged schools, anti-slavery and freedmen's societies, temperance leagues, Masonic lodges, ladies' societies, literary and reading groups, students' clubs, gymnastic and choral unions, firefighting companies, chambers of commerce, and agricultural alliances. The United States State Department compendium of foreign condolences ran to over 800 pages. European voices from Austria and Belgium to Switzerland and Württemberg, and Latin American ones from Argentina to Venezuela dominated the volume. But those of China, Japan, North and West Africa, and the gamut of British imperial dependencies indicated that Lincoln had become a truly global figure, known in every continent, and that well beyond the walls of courts and parliaments, he had touched the lives of common people. From the US legation in Paris, John Bigelow confessed his sheer amazement of the grip that Lincoln had exerted over popular opinion among the masses of Europe. This outpouring was not summer snow, but the substantial prelude to a longer and more significant story. Lincoln's international standing would burgeon over the next two generations, well into the 1920s, and he would continue to be widely invoked throughout the 20th century in different places at different times for sundry purposes. Given how hard it has been for Lincoln's domestic audiences to agree on his defining qualities, it's unsurprising that outside the United States, his complexities would make him as plastic a symbol as he was at home. During the heyday of Lincoln's international reputation, during the last third of the 19th century and the early decades of the next, Lincoln's authority derived less from his role as emancipator than as the perceived defender of the principles of liberal and democratic nationalism. Lincoln was widely cast as the heroic tribune whose defense of his nation's integrity was far removed from narrow chauvinism. Instead, he won the acclaim of radicals and nation builders around the globe whose own lives were devoted to projects inspired by the same universal democratic principles. This purposeful nationalism spoke to a wide spectrum of progressives, socialists, radicals, and Democrats, who combined nationalist aspirations with informal membership of a community